Hello, big caballers, and welcome to the long-awaited Brad's experience at GenCon 2023. Not long-awaited by you, long-awaited by mostly by Bob, who I was supposed to send this to several days ago and have since decided just to redo entirely. So here we are. My biggest takeaway, and some of these you will have heard or will hear when Bob releases the video that he and I did one night. I believe it was after night 2 at Gen Con. He and I sat down and did like these are our immediate thoughts of the day kind of thing. So some of these might be a repeat for some of you, but regardless, here we go. My biggest kind of visceral opinion is that it was much cooler this year. I mean, temperature-wise. I think that the outside temperature, as far as the weather goes, was a couple degrees hotter this year than it was in 2022. But inside the convention center, I actually felt much cooler this year than I did the year before, and I think there was more people there this year. So I don't know if there was upgrades made to the air conditioning or what the deal was, but regardless, I was more than comfortable this year. A couple times I was even chilly. Those would have been the times when I was just sitting there waiting for my next seminar or waiting for the guys to meet me to go to eat or something. But there was a couple times when I was actually chilly a couple times. And I'll take that over hot and sweaty any day, by the way. I felt more engaged this year. I took less footage this year, and that wasn't on purpose. It was because I was more engaged in the moment and just didn't think about it. My thought process last year is I was there to accumulate content and to learn what Gen Con was. This year I was there to experience Gen Con for what Gen Con is. You know, I was there for a couple of the games. I intended to be there to play some of the games, but as mentioned in other places, I waited around too long and didn't get signed up in time for either of the Darrington Press / Critical Role games, Daggerheart and Candela Obscura, as well as I particularly wanted to play in DCC Dungeon Crawl Classics Weird West situation, or in lieu of that, any DCC, just because I wanted to play their system. Because we aspired to play their system, so I wanted to get, you know, a baseline from the actual experts beforehand, but I did not. I would have also loved to play something in the Cypher system. Goodman Games does the Cypher system, which we're also intrigued by. I did visit both of their booths. Well, DCC had a booth, a very large booth, a couple booths probably, of real estate in Dealers Hall. Goodman Games had their own room across the hallway from Dealers Hall, and I spent some time in both, bought products from both. From DCC, I bought their soft cover copy of their core rulebook, which they were selling at an incredible deal. It was $10, and I bought a $1 adventure, which they had a handful, at least 2, maybe there was more, of different adventures you could choose from for their dollar offering, which I did. I feel like I got something else there too, but I can't think of it right now. And from Goodman Games, I bought the hardcover core rule book of Old Gods of Appalachia, which is the first hardcover rule book that I've bought since 1983 or something, when the red box set was out. And I obviously didn't buy that. I was 13 or something when that came out, so obviously the parents bought that. But Bob and I, together or individually, have bought several PDF versions of a handful of games. And Bob obviously has some hardcover rule books from 5e and I think DCC as well, but I'm not sure which ones he has. But anyway, I bought the hardcover edition of the Old Gods of Appalachia, as well as the soft cover, like magazine-sized version of their player's guide. I bought some other things that we'll talk about. We'll review all the things that I got and probably all the things that Bob got and how all that went down. But just as an idea, I did spend more time as a gamer this year rather than an observer like I was last year. Still did some seminars. Saw Ed Greenwood a couple times. Ed might be writing a story for me. He joked during one of his seminars that it appears as though he personally is killing all the best fantasy editors in the world, because seemingly every time he works with one, they pass at some point, which is sad, obviously. But he he mentioned that in a joking manner, and then as we were leaving, I said, Ed, I would read a story you wrote about you killing all the greatest editors in the world. And he chuckled and said, all right. So we'll see if that comes about. That would be super awesome. Not only as a story, but that I was there for the inception of that, I suppose. Like I said earlier, I think there was more people there this year than there was last year. I don't know about totals. I don't know about how each day broke down, but it just felt like the crowds were bigger. Like the crowd waiting outside of Dealers Hall that Thursday morning at 9 or 10 or whenever they open. The one that looks like a Black Friday sale, when they actually used to do that in person on Friday morning. And just in general, navigating through Dealers Hall seemed more congested. The secondary and side halls seemed more difficult to navigate. I just think there was more people. I don't know. That's purely conjecture from a subjective viewpoint, but that's what that is. I'm sure that at some point Bobby will have the actual numbers and we can compare and contrast what I felt was happening and what actually did happen. So we'll see. I don't know. But it felt like more to me. It felt more, it felt cooler. And I felt more like I belonged there rather than I was a scientific observer, as it were. Which I did feel like last year. I felt like somebody going to a zoo, almost. Someone who planned to work at the zoo at some point eventually, but still someone who was just there on a recon. that being said, I enjoyed both years, and for different reasons. Last year I came, I slept in my van out in the parking lot at Gate 10, which I enjoy. I've already had my van was set up for such things. This year we stayed at a friend of Bobby's in Greenwood, which is, I don't know, maybe a 15-20 minute drive from the convention center. Obviously that had its benefits, a shower right there and a bathroom as opposed to Porta-John and driving down the road to Anytime Fitness for a shower. Climate control was always good. And it's cheaper to some extent, obviously always, but the Gate 10, I think I paid $80 for. I got there Wednesday evening and left. Well, I was supposed to leave Sunday. I ended up leaving early because I got food poisoning, but not from the convention. From a restaurant near the Anytime, or between the Anytime Fitness and the Gate 10. Regardless, $80 for Wednesday night through Sunday, and obviously that's cheaper than a hotel. $80 is pretty cheap. The way that staying off-site is more expensive, even if you don't have to pay for a hotel, is you have to pay for parking every day at that point. And the parking garages downtown that are connected to the convention center via the walkways and whatnot are, well, the one we stayed at was $30 a day. So if you're there 5 days, that's $150 as opposed to the $80. So, but if you're splitting that between a couple, 3 people, then that's cheaper than the $80 that I spent. Now, it would have been cheaper altogether to just buy that 5-day parking pass for Gate 10 and park there every day. The difference there being, instead of, however long, maybe it's a 3-block walk, maybe, through the parking garage, through the skyways, and into the convention center. The Gate 10 would have been more than that. It's on the Gate 10 parking is on the south side of Lucas Oil Stadium, which itself is on the south side of the convention center. So that's a further walk outside rather than inside. And the one thing too they do is Gate 10 runs a shuttle service. The shuttle buses. I think they pick up every 15 minutes, and then drop off every 15 minutes. So they'll pick you up at the parking lot, drive you to the front doors of the convention center, and drop you off, and then they'll pick people up at the front door of the convention center and take them and drop them off at the parking lot. And I believe that rotates every 15 minutes. They've got a couple different buses running. So that's really handy, and it's really cheap, and that's not a bad option at all. The one bad thing would be if it's raining, then you would be walking at least from your car to the bus, and perhaps having to wait outside and wait for the bus. Whereas the parking garage is inside, and then you walk through the skyways inside and to the convention center itself. So there's that. There's the pros and cons of parking in the parking garages versus Gate 10. And Gate 10, obviously, you can stay there. I wasn't doing anything wrong by sleeping in my van there. There's campers and RVs and all sorts of things there. So now they do pay more for that, but I believe that's about the space. Like, you've got a camper and RV, it's more space taken up than my minivan. So there's that. Next year, I think will be about the same for me as this year. If I run across any new gaming systems that I like, I'll want to buy them and try them. Next year, the difference being that so far, in my first 2 years, I have not played any games there, which I will try to do next year. This year, I saw them right away. We went and we go and look on the website early, and order our passes pretty early and whatnot. But then we generally wait to sign up for the events and to see if there's anything that we want to do together. This year, with what our schedules are now, it's just become increasingly hard for us to get together, and that didn't happen in a timely manner. And by the time I went to look to sign up for them myself, they were full. So I won't make that mistake this next year. I will, of course, try to coordinate with Bob and Chad and Chris and Jimmy and Owen or whoever might be there. But if that starts to become an issue, then I'll just do the things. Because I'm still not even sure what the interest would be from the other fellas to play the games. I know last year Bobby and Chad played some BattleTech, and last year and this year Bobby and Chris do that True Dungeon thing, which sounds super awesome, but it's like $80-$100 or something, and it's just not something. And then there's in-game purchases on top of that with tokens and whatnot. So that's just not something that I'm interested in enough to put out that kind of money for it. I mean, that's a whole cool rule book and some maps or something. Which is another thing I bought this year, by the way. I bought some maps from a existing, world gaming thing. Was it Arn? I think it was Arn. But regardless, they were selling maps of their analogous Europe. And so I bought 3 of those. I think there were 3 for $10, I think. But I haven't looked at them very closely yet. I've been gone with work for quite a bit of the time. Since GenCon's been over. And so the maps are sitting on my coffee table at home, and I really haven't looked at them really closely yet. So, but I don't even know if they have like the names of the towns and cities and villages from that game or that world on those maps. I think it may just be a blank map that you could do with what you will, maybe. But they may have the towns and stuff anyway. But regardless, they were cool maps, and they were $10, and I bought them. One note. I didn't have a debit card this year. Mine had been compromised. My bank noticed some sketchy activity. Some weird website had dinged me for $1, and $1, whatevs. But they said that's oftentimes a test balloon, as it were, where they'll see if they can get the $1, and if they can, then they'll go back later on and take more. So my bank, even though they know I don't hardly ever keep any money in that account, that's the account I use for paying bills and traveling. So just whenever I've got a bill to pay, I go put it in there, or whenever I'm traveling, I go put whatever money that I want to use traveling that I budgeted for the travel, I'll put in there and I use it. And that way, if anybody ever does steal anything, they're going to get a couple $100, $300, $400, $500, depending on what bills and travel I'm doing, something, whatever. Which is obviously not optimal, but they're not going to get it all, right? But regardless, yay for my bank, credit union actually, who noticed it and shut it down and fraudulent and blah blah blah, and I haven't gotten and used my new debit card yet. So I just cash only at GenCon. And so none of the what am I looking for? None of the places to get food and drink inside the concessions. None of the concessions inside the convention center would take cash. They were all card only. And I don't have and never have had a credit card. I've worked for people who have given me credit cards for traveling and whatnot, but I have never personally had a credit card on purpose. When I was young, it was because I knew that I should not have credit. I was not responsible enough to have credit. It would have been maxed out, and I would have been making the minimum payments, and that just wouldn't have been good. And I was self-aware enough to know that. And then I learned how to live without that credit. And I paid off my last bank loan in 1992 and have never had bank credit. That's the way I like it. It does have some disadvantages, obviously, but I've also not paid a ton of interest in my life. So, regardless, a note for those of you who may be going to GenCon at some point in the future: they don't take cash. The individual booths where you're buying games or dice or minis or whatever perhaps did take cash. I mean, several of them did for me, obviously. But the concessions, not so much. And I'm not sure about the food trucks outside. I only ate outside in food trucks one time. And by that time, I was out of cash because I hadn't planned on buying $100 worth of old Gods of Appalachia stuff when I budgeted my cash along. But it did. So anyways, by that time I was out of cash, and Bobby was paying for things. Now, that works out pretty good because Bobby and I bank at the same establishment, and I can just transfer him money from my account to his account seamlessly with my phone, which is pretty handy. So then we just kept a running tally of, Burger King breakfast and breadsticks at the food truck, and I think a parking thing. Oh, and we had dinner one night with Bobby, myself, Jimmy, and Owen, and we walked down to the, I think, old spaghetti factory, and Bob paid for that too. So there was a handful of things that that Bob paid for initially, and then before we ever got home, while we were driving home, and I was confident that the tally was complete, I just transferred him the money, and it was, wonderful. What a country. But the point of the story is, be prepared for that. Either bring a card or someone with a card, or be prepared not to eat at the concessions inside the convention center, which you're really not missing anything. Hot dogs and whatever, deli sandwiches and chips and sodas and the such. Oh, I'm not sure about this concession or not. I'm not sure if that was the convention center running it or if it was an individual company, but they had a curry stand just set out by itself with no other food around, which makes me wonder whether or not it was run by the convention center. But they had, handful of types of curry, and it must have been pretty good because there was a line the whole time, and smelled wonderful if you're into that curry smell. But I'm not sure whether or not they would have taken cash or not. I just didn't even stop to ask. But for the most part, you'll need a card or someone with a card to eat inside of the convention center, unless their policies change next year. And like I said, I'm not sure about the food trucks. I'm sure you have a food truck. Those people, that's their business. The concessions part of the convention center is one of the things that we do to add to our business model. A food truck, that's their business. So I'm sure they're not going to turn down a $20 bill if you try to give it to them, But I don't know, because the concessions inside the building did indeed turn down a $20 bill I tried to give them. And they even had my food right there. I can't remember what I'd gotten. Nachos, hot dog, something, and a soda. And they had it there in their hands. They'd done it or whatever, and then they just wouldn't hand it to me when I tried to hand them actual folding money instead of a plastic card. Which, I get your business, run how you want, and they've obviously made that business decision for a reason, and more power to them. God love them. Whatever works for them. But It is unhandy if you don't have a little piece of plastic in your pocket, specifically designed for that use. What else about Gen Con this year? I also spent time this year talking to a lot of people. I was just off on my own most of the time because the other guys, they've got their interests that lie outside of mine. So I spent quite a bit of time just by myself doing my seminars, walking around, looking at the things that interested me, and otherwise waiting for them to want to go back to Chris's or out to dinner or wherever we were going, whatever we were doing. So oftentimes I would find a cushy chair, oftentimes right at the top of the escalators where the convention center skyways meet up with, the mall and the parking units and whatnots. And I would wait there comfortably, which is also where I would get chilly, by the way, and where I talked to some really nice people. One young lady was from the Carolinas, and her mom had a business where they would go buy like thrift clothes and cut them up and put them back together into designs of their own, which is what started the conversation. She had on a very unique kind of dress, and I was like, nice dress. And she said, hey, I made it. And that turned into a whole conversation. That was cool. Sorry, I don't remember your name, and I'm sure you're not going to be watching this anyways, but she was there, I believe, with her boyfriend, who was off doing something else, or perhaps even husband. I talked to a really nice Jehovah's Witness. She wasn't there Jehovah's Witnessing, and she obviously wasn't there gaming, I don't think. I didn't even ask her if they gamed. But she was out across the street on the corner doing her "Have you heard the good news" thing. And she was actually taking a break. They run those in shifts. I don't know if you noticed, but if I've had the opportunity to drive by the same place several times or watch out those windows, and they kind of run in shifts. So she was spending her time across the street in the convention center soaking up some air conditioning. That conversation was actually about religion and what they believed, and the 144,000 in heaven and lots of things. And honestly, I found myself agreeing with her on a lot of things. I'm not saying that I'm fixing to turn into a Jehovah's Witness, but she at least seemed more reasonable in her beliefs than I find a lot of religious people of any faith denomination. It was undoubtedly she was a devout believer in her religion, but more reasonable. And I don't know if that's all Jehovah's Witnesses or just her. But I've studied Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Taoism, lots of isms and entities. A lot through the ages. Philosophy, religion, comparative religions. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about anything thusly. I talked to a young lady who works for WotC, as someone in their social media department, specifically on the card game. What is that? Magic the Gathering. She interned there last year, watched the whole OGL thing from afar while she was finishing her graduate degree at San Diego, I believe. I don't know if that's DSU, perhaps. I don't know. I didn't ask. But, yeah, so she was watching that from afar, being in communication with her friends and team members there at WotC. And yeah, I really don't have anything to report thusly. Like, she didn't condemn things WotC did, or condemn the people that were mad at what was going on, or whatever. You know, she has friends in the creative spaces in and outside of WotC, and it was just interesting to hear a perspective of someone who was on the inside watching from the outside, as it were. It was pretty neat. I enjoyed that quite a bit. I talked quite a bit with the people from Goodman Games, got kind of a rundown, kind of a walkthrough sort of the thing, and then talked with some of the people who worked there about working for Goodman Games in particular, working on the Old Gods of Appalachia specifically, and their relationships with the creators of the Old Gods of Appalachia podcast. I guess they're from similar areas in North Carolina, close to, and know some of the same people even. That was really neat. I enjoyed that a lot. I love that Old Gods of Appalachia podcast, which was what made me interested in the game. Also very awesome that it's that cipher system, which I was interested in anyway. And there's a couple other, I don't know if you call them, do you call all games under one system? Are they different games, or are they just different settings within the same system? If you've got any thoughts on that, comments please. I'm going to call it different settings within the same system. They've got other settings that I would like to, or that I'm interested in, settings, worlds, that interest me. So I would assume next year I would spend more time with Goodman Games. I know that Goodman Games has a couple different kind of programs that I'm interested in, and yeah, I can see myself spending more time with them in the future. And playing the games, not just the Goodman Games, but the other games, whatever. If there's something new that I'm interested in, or whether it be the DCC or the Cipher System stuff, or 5e, or the Darrington Press stuff, or a completely new game. You know, maybe by then I'm more interested in the BattleTech, which I know this channel, the majority of the views on this channel are about BattleTech, and it's just not my thing. Futuristic, mechanized stuff. I mean, I watch Star Treks, I watch the Star Warses, I watch Aliens, you know, all the things, but when I'm playing the games, or even reading the books, I can watch somebody's version of the future or sci-fi or whatever. When I'm reading something and or creating the vision of it in my head, it's not my preferred genre. So I just don't. I want to do the BattleTechs, but mostly for the people that enjoy the BattleTechs. But I'm just not. I would much rather talk about 5e or the other systems that I've mentioned here today, or some new system that comes along. Like, I haven't even talked about anything Pathfinder yet. I mean, we did during the whole OGL thing, but today or this year at GenCon, I didn't really Pathfinder anything. So that's definitely in the cards in the future. Yeah. So, pros of this year's GenCon. It was cooler. I was much more comfortable. Physically, The older I get, the more hermity I get, and the less I want to be in crowds. But I don't get any sort of like agoraphobia or anxiety because I'm in a crowd. I get frustrated. There was one day in particular when I was ready to just get out of the mass of people for a while. Luckily, one of my bestest friends in the world, Franz, lives in Greenwood as well, and he had the time and availability. We'd already decided to meet that day, and he got there. We met, walked him through the dealer's hall. I said, "So what are you interested in?" He says, "Nothing in particular. Just want to hang out with you." And I was like, "Let's get out of here and go get some lunch then." So that was awesome. So we went and got lunch at a nice little diner in Greenwood, and then ran some errands, Costco and the such, and then went back to his house, talked with his lovely bride for a while, and she went on to Saturday night. So she was going to the church down the road. Like, I think she was driving like a half hour, 45 minutes, because the priest that she likes got transferred. So now she goes down there. So good on her. Glad she's got that relationship. But that one day I was ready to get out, and Franz came through, and that was good. But that's just if the Buddhists are right and we reincarnate to work on things, I'm definitely here in this life now to work on my patience. And by the way, I'm failing. I don't know if that means next life I would come back as something worse, less something, or just I plop back down into another body and keep working on patience. Or who knows, I still may have a year or two left here to work on it, and maybe that bell rings right before the end and I get to move on to the next obstacle in my journey for illumination. Dharma. So pros. I was more comfortable physically, comfortable mental health wise is just same. Pros this year, I was more engaged in the actual purpose of GenCon, the gaming part of it, the look, going to the different booths and talking to the people and buying the things and learning the things and doing those things. I was definitely more engaged in that this year. I met some great people, saw some great cosplay, anywhere from me and my third grader put this together this morning to looks like I just stepped off of a movie set. Saw a really funny shirt. I have the black shirt with the yellow letters that says "Who's your DM" or GM? Who's your GM? And so I saw a guy walking by with that same shirt, except in the same color letters, same block, same size, everything. But instead of saying "Who's your GM," it said Purdue GM. I just thought that was hilarious. It's an Indiana thing. Yeah, just overall pro experience. 2023 Gen Con. Cons. My patience. The mass of people and the stupidity of some of the people. And I don't mean that in a... I'm not... People make some poor decisions. And I'm all about people making their own poor decisions. But when those poor decisions cost me time, effort, energy, my patience wears thin. So that's a con. But that's more about me than about the Gen Cons. Cons. Plastic card in your pocket for the stuff you want to buy inside the Gen Con that they will not take folding money for anymore. Cons, I waited around too long and didn't sign up for the games I wanted. Don't let that be you. This year, I was more engaged into the gaming of the GenCon, which was a pro. A con is that negatively affected my filming things for this channel and the Twitterverse and such. And no, I'm not going to call it X. I don't care what you do, Elon. And apparently now you can't block me. So Twitterverse. By the way, does anybody else from the very first time I saw X, right? Every time I hear that, in my head I hear X gonna give it to you. Someone else told me that same thing. Well, I told them that, and they were like, I thought the same thing. I don't remember who that was, but every time, X gonna give it to you. So Twitter, Tweeter, Twits, don't care, but that's what it is. It's not X. I mean, you can call it X. You can do what you want. You bought the company. You know, and I get the branding of it, SpaceX, X whatever. Tesla X. I know why you called it Tesla. Great dude there. But that don't really fall into your X thing. Regardless, I get it, but I'm not going to do it. You can't make me be a part of it. I mean, I'll be a part of it, but you can't make me not call it tweets, tweeters, twitters, whatevers. So I was less engaged in that, so that's a con. Because the whole purpose of me going to begin with was for the channel. Last year, when that was the whole reason I went. This year, I went to be more engaged into the gaming aspect, but that manifested itself with me being less engaged in the content creation aspect. Sorry, Bob. So there's that. This has gone on for 42 minutes, and I probably could have boiled that all down to 12. So... But that's what you get with this there Geek Ball. So, there's that. GenCon 2023, put a bow on it. And, you know what I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask you to do that algorithm dance. Like, subscribe, comment, share, ring the bell so that you're notified whenever we drop something new. And in the meantime... love one another. Bye.